Hey, good morning, Choice Residential. Hope your day is off to a great start. So today I want to chat about final walkthroughs. And I want to just give you some thoughts I have to help make sure that that experience is positive for your buyers and to make sure that you're covering all bases when performing that final walkthrough. The first thing is you want to make sure you're doing that final walkthrough as close to the closing as you can. Now, it's common practice that you might do the final walkthrough maybe the evening before closing, if you've got closing the next morning. And that's okay. Just something you want to keep in mind is things can happen overnight. So even if your buyer can't go back to the house the morning of closing, it's not a bad idea for you to go back real quick on your way to the attorney's office to do one quick last walkthrough to make sure that a pipe hasn't burst, a tree hasn't fallen through the roof, or something crazy like that, right? Something hasn't happened to damage the property since you were there the evening before. Because, of course, once you close, it's the buyer's house. It becomes their problem, right? So put eyes on it as close to closing as you can. And I say that because sometimes I would see agents perform final walkthroughs several days before closing. And that's really never a good idea unless you are, in fact, going to go back to do a quick last look right before closing. Another issue that comes up sometimes, in fact, I spoke to an agent this morning about this issue, and that is that the seller isn't out in time. Now, just keep in mind that the seller contractually has to be out by the time of closing. But if you have a 9 a.m. closing and you do your final walkthrough at 6 p.m. the night before and the seller is not out, well, that's not really a great thing. So you can perform the walkthrough as best you can, but then again, you're definitely going to want to go back before the closing. I've also had situations where we did the walkthrough on the way to the attorney's office and the seller still had movers there. And what do you do in those cases? Well, for one thing, you talk to the closing attorney. The movers have insurance, so if something happened, even after the closing, that's what's going to kick in. But at that point, it becomes beyond the scope of what we can handle. And if the buyer still wants to close, you need to have them consulting with an attorney. And of course, call me and I'll help talk you through it. Some other thoughts on the final walkthrough. It's a good idea for you to make sure you review the offer to purchase beforehand to make sure you're very clear on what personal property was conveying, to make sure that it's still there when you go to check the house, and make sure that all fixtures that are supposed to be there are there. So you might want to just jot down a little list of items that you know you're going to want to look for and check on when you arrive. Then for the final walkthrough, you're going to want to go room to room, right? Flip the lights on, check faucets in the bathroom and in the kitchen, open cabinets. You want to give it a pretty thorough walkthrough to make sure everything is in the proper condition. You don't want the buyer going back after closing and realizing that you guys missed something. The other thing to do is before you ever get to the final walkthrough, and really earlier in your transaction, you want to talk to the buyer about the way the house is going to look now that all the furniture is gone. So if it was vacant before, then this is a non-issue. But the house looks one way when it's fully furnished and staged and looks really great. And then they get there for the final walkthrough, everything's been moved out, and it maybe doesn't look as impressive. And so you don't want that kind of feeling with the buyer. You want to just prepare them ahead of time. Like, hey guys, just look, it's going to look a little bit differently. You're probably going to need to come in and either clean yourself or bring in professional cleaners. Just prepare them for that so that if the seller didn't do a great job cleaning, the buyer already knew that was coming and they're not disappointed, right? If you just get riled up because, I can't believe the seller didn't sweep or didn't wipe the counters down, you're just making the experience worse for your buyer, right? So prepare them ahead of time to have to clean, and prepare them for the fact that the house is going to be a little bit different. They're going to notice more paint imperfections and flooring imperfections and things like that once the furniture is all out. Okay, so set proper expectations to keep the buyer's attitude really positive on closing day. And if you do all that stuff, then you can have a great experience. Your buyer can have a great experience. You might want to work on creating just a little checklist for yourself on things that you want to look at the home. So not only do you want to go around the inside of the home, like I discussed, make sure you're going around the outside of the home, checking in the crawl space, make sure if there was any stuff in there that's been removed, there's no issues down there. Do that one last really good check through of the house, and then head off to a successful closing. So if you have any questions or thoughts on final walkthroughs, I'd love to hear them. And if you need me, just give me a shout.